Uber just reported one of the strongest quarters in its history. It served 208 million monthly active customers, completed almost 3.9 billion trips, generated $58 billion in gross bookings, and crossed $10 billion in trailing free cash flow for the first time. The stock still closed 5.3% lower on results day. That fall does not prove investors rejected Uber's autonomous strategy. A single-day move reflects earnings, guidance, and expectations together, but it captures the tension. At almost the same moment, Uber confirmed that it would commit more than $10 billion over the coming years to autonomous vehicles, comparable to an entire year of its current cash generation. Why is the world's largest ride-hailing platform spending that much money to secure a place in a market it already appears to dominate? Because when the driver disappears, the network effect that built Uber may weaken with it. And Uber has now given 4 different answers in 6 years to the same question. What exactly is it supposed to own in the autonomous value chain? The bigger question is whether a platform can remain powerful when its most important suppliers own the technology, the vehicles, and increasingly the customer relationship. Uber's first answer was full integration. Its advanced technologies group tried to build the autonomous driver in-house because removing the human driver could be existential. Then in December 2020, Uber sold that business to Aurora. It invested $400 million and received roughly 26% of the combined company. The new answer was that Uber did not need to own autonomy. It could remain the marketplace while somebody else carried the cost of building the driver. For the next several years, that asset-light story helped define Uber's recovery. It would aggregate fragmented human supply and leave vehicles and autonomy to partners. Now the strategy has moved again. Uber calls itself the commercialization layer for autonomous mobility. It is investing in developers, committing to vehicles, supporting depots and charging, financing fleets, and operating hundreds of sensor-equipped cars through AV labs to collect training data for its partners. Selling the self-driving unit and later rebuilding an autonomy data fleet is the clearest symbol of the identity crisis. Uber is taking capital intensity back without taking control of the autonomous driver back. Each decision can be rational on its own. Together, they show a company still searching for the part of the value chain it can actually defend. Uber's current strategy is not random. It rests on a clear theory of how the industry develops. Think of an autonomous ride as 4 businesses stacked together. First, a vehicle manufacturer builds the car. Second, an autonomous driving developer builds the software and sensors that replace the human driver. Third, a fleet owner finances those vehicles and handles charging, cleaning, and maintenance. Finally, somebody has to bring in the customer, providing the app, demand, pricing, payments, routing, customer support, and relationships with cities, airports, and venues. Uber no longer wants to build the entire stack itself. Its preferred model is partnership. Car makers and autonomous driving companies provide the vehicle and the driver. Financiers or local operators can own and run the fleet. Uber provides the customer network and the commercial system around it. It may also invest in developers or commit to buying vehicles to help the ecosystem reach scale. In simple terms, Uber wants to own the layer that connects all the other layers to the rider. Management compares autonomous vehicles with AI models. Instead of one foundation model controlling everything, several frontier systems emerged. Uber argues that physical AI will follow the same pattern, different autonomous drivers winning across countries, climates, vehicle classes, and use cases. The Pony.ai agreement is almost a textbook example. Pony provides the autonomous driver. Vehicle and fleet partners provide and operate the cars. Uber supplies booking, payments, customer access, and support. The companies now plan to use that structure for more than 2,000 robotaxis across 5 European cities, beginning with Zagreb, with further deployment planned in the Middle East. That is almost a textbook demonstration of Uber's preferred future. It is also still a plan. No deployment timetable, no disclosed take rate, and no proof that the economics remain attractive once the fleet reaches scale. This is what fragmented autonomous supply means. Instead of one company controlling the vehicle, the autonomous driver, the fleet, and the customer app, those layers remain divided among multiple companies. Different suppliers win in different markets, and none becomes powerful enough to bypass Uber everywhere. Uber can then become the common commercial layer connecting them all. The alternative is concentration or vertical integration. Tesla is trying to control the car, the autonomous driver, the fleet economics, and the customer app itself. Waymo does not manufacture the vehicle, but it controls the autonomous driver, the service, and the direct customer relationship. If either model reaches sufficient scale, it may have little reason to share customers, data, or margin with Uber. Uber's $10 billion wager is therefore not simply that robotaxis will grow. It is that the industry will remain divided enough to need Uber as the glue. Uber is betting it can own the customer and commercialization layer without owning either the vehicle or the autonomous driver. The moat test asks whether that layer remains essential once its partners reach scale. Uber unquestionably has capabilities. The question is whether those capabilities are barriers. Its demand network can reduce customer acquisition cost and keep vehicles busy. Its mixed fleet can use human drivers when autonomous vehicles are unavailable. Its payments, dispatch, support, and regulatory relationships make entry easier. These are real transition advantages. But a capability becomes a moat only when customers or suppliers cannot bypass it without damaging their own economics, and competitors cannot reproduce it at reasonable cost. Autonomy changes the unit of supply. Uber's original flywheel connected millions of fragmented drivers who could not build their own demand networks. A robotaxi operator can deploy hundreds or thousands of vehicles, coordinate them internally, and market directly. Fewer, larger suppliers gain bargaining power over the aggregator. This creates a partner paradox. Uber can help an autonomous developer raise capital, collect data, secure vehicles, and find riders. But every successful launch makes that developer more capable of going direct later. Uber's ideal outcome is not simply partner success, it is partner success combined with permanent dependence on Uber. That is why a coalition of smaller suppliers does not settle the question. It proves that suppliers without distribution value Uber. It does not prove that the stronger suppliers will continue to need it. Now put Tesla and Waymo back into that 4-layer stack. They represent two different ways of collapsing it, and therefore two different paths around Uber. Tesla is the most complete architectural challenge to Uber. It is attempting to own the vehicle, autonomy software, training data, compute, manufacturing, charging, consumer app, and fleet economics. If that system works at scale, Tesla can internalize the vehicle margin, autonomy fee, fleet return, and marketplace take rate that an Uber-mediated stack must divide among several companies. Tesla also has a potentially more generalizable approach, a camera-led neural network trained from a large production fleet, updated through software rather than rebuilt around a heavily mapped city each time. Tesla reported Cybercab production had begun, paid Robotaxi miles were approaching 2.5 million, and active FSD subscriptions had reached 1.48 million. But those figures do not establish mature robotaxi economics. Tesla's services operate under different supervision and permitting conditions. Public estimates near 20 cents per mile are targets or projections, not comparable, fully loaded operating results. The cost of depreciation, financing, energy, deadheading, cleaning, maintenance, insurance, remote assistance, and downtime still has to be demonstrated. Waymo provides the opposite evidence. It does not manufacture the underlying vehicle, but it owns the mature autonomous driver, sensor system, direct app, dispatch, and service design. It already completes more than 500,000 paid rides every week, and it now operates in 11 American metro areas without Uber. That makes Waymo less vertically integrated than Tesla, but much more commercially proven today. And Waymo is now exercising the direct distribution option. Its Phoenix partnership with Uber ended in June. Waymo then notified Uber that it intends to launch its own app in Austin and Atlanta in January 2028, ending Uber's exclusivity there. Uber says the existing Waymo deployment should remain on its platform through at least May 2028 under the current contract. Notably, Waymo has not announced a single new Uber city since Atlanta. Every new market since has gone through its own app. Investors understood the signal. On the day the notice was confirmed, Uber shares fell more than 4%, to their lowest level in over a year. The market was repricing the divorce, not a quarter. That is not confirmation that every commercial relationship is ending. It is something strategically more precise. Uber's strongest partner no longer accepts Uber as the exclusive owner of the customer relationship. But before concluding that integration wins, Uber's strongest evidence deserves to be taken seriously. Management says trip growth accelerated in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Phoenix during the second quarter, even as direct autonomous services expanded. Uber also says its category position in those markets is higher than it was a year earlier. The argument is that robotaxis expand the ride-hailing market rather than simply taking trips from Uber. That is plausible. Riders can try Waymo and keep Uber for coverage, price, or shorter waits. Human and autonomous fleets may coexist for years. Delivery demand can also smooth Uber's utilization across day parts. Academic research strengthens the transition case. A 2026 management science model found that a platform with flexible human driver supply can outperform a vertically integrated robotaxi service in large markets with sufficiently patient customers, even when the platform has a cost disadvantage. The robotaxi operator must commit fleet capacity in advance. The platform can draw on a wider, more elastic pool. But the conditions are the argument. Uber itself says autonomous vehicles still represent less than half of 1% of its roughly 300 million weekly trips. Evidence at that penetration cannot tell us what happens when autonomous supply becomes dense enough to control wait times. And Uber's own finance chief attributed American growth to several other factors. Insurance savings reinvested particularly in California, new products, expansion in sparse markets, and a World Cup benefit. Coexistence works today. The structural question is whether it still works when autonomous penetration is 20 times higher and the best fleets no longer need help finding riders. The final question is not whether robotaxis grow. Goldman Sachs forecasts a roughly $415 billion global market by 2035, while Morgan Stanley places the wider, autonomous mobility opportunity close to $1 trillion by 2040. These are forecasts, but lower costs are likely to create demand as well as replace existing rides. Customers will not preserve Uber's business model out of loyalty. They will compare generalized cost, fare, waiting time, reliability, safety, and coverage. Once safety and trust pass an acceptable threshold, price and ETA become powerful switching mechanisms because riders can move between apps in seconds. This is where vertical integration matters. If Tesla or another integrated operator can match safety and wait time while internalizing several margin layers, it has a structural path to a lower fare. If Waymo achieves sufficient local fleet density, ownership of the autonomous driver and direct app may be enough, even without manufacturing the vehicle. A growing market can therefore support Uber and still weaken its position. Trip volume can rise while take rates fall, capital requirements increase, and the most profitable customers migrate to direct autonomous services. Relevance is not the same as value capture. Uber is not facing immediate extinction. Regulation, city-by-city deployment, and the long tail of trips outside dense urban cores can preserve its mixed network for years. The company has formidable demand, operating capability, and cash flow. But its $10 billion autonomous program has not yet created a defensible moat. It has created a portfolio of options built around one wager. Autonomous supply remains fragmented, mixed fleets persist, and Uber's utilization advantage stays more valuable than a supplier's direct relationship with the rider. If that happens, Uber can become the booking.com of autonomous mobility. If supply concentrates around a small number of integrated winners, Uber faces weaker bargaining power, compressed take rates, and retreat from the premium markets where autonomous fleets scale first. The fork is concentration versus fragmentation. The test is whether Uber's market position survives as autonomous penetration rises. And the tell, so far, is that the strongest proven supplier is taking back direct access to the customer. So is Uber building the operating system for a fragmented robotaxi market? Or spending billions helping suppliers reach the point where they no longer need it?